In this movie, I'll show you how you can transform partial path outlines. So for example, you might transform some anchor points independently of others inside a single path outline, as we did with the shear tool a few movies back. Or you can even transform segments independently of their anchor points. And along the way, we're going to transform these base elements into this fully realized invitation. And so I'm going to go ahead and zoom into the upper left corner of this document, which contains this gray template in the background, as well as these couple of blue objects right here. And then we also have an invisible circle. So notice when I hover over it, not only does it appear because I've got my smart guides turned on, but I also see a little square next to my arrow cursor. So I'm going to go ahead and select that object. And I'll give it a stroke as well by clicking on the second color swatch and setting it to black, just so we can see what we're doing. All right, now let's say I want to transform these curved segments, all four of them, independently of the anchor points. Then the first thing I would do is to go up to the Select menu, choose Object, and then choose Direction Handles, which is another word for control handles inside Illustrator. So go ahead and choose that command, and notice now that deselects all the anchor points and it selects the segments as indicated by the control handles. Now I want you to select the scale tool, and so if the shear tool is active, go ahead and choose the scale tool from that flyout menu or press the S key, and then move your cursor to some diagonal position 45 degrees from the transformation origin at the center of the shape. And then either drag outward like so, or you can drag inward. And I'm going to go ahead and drag all the way inward like so until the segments end up crossing each other. And I'm also going to press the Shift key to constrain the proportions of the shape. And I'm having a few problems with my smart guide snapping me to things. So I'm going to take another try at this by zooming farther in and then starting my drag a little farther out like so, and then moving in while I'm pressing the Shift key once again until I match the curvature of those objects in the template, at which point I'll go ahead and release in order to create this effect here. All right, now I'm going to swap the fill and the stroke by pressing Shift X so that the fill is black and we lose the stroke. And then I'll go ahead and press the V key in order to switch to the black arrow tool, and I'll click on the shape to select the entire thing. All right, now I'll switch to the Rotate tool, which again, you can get by pressing the R key. And I'll just go ahead and press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to bring up the Rotate dialog box. And I'll set the angle to 45 degrees. And then I'll click the Copy button in order to create a duplicate. And then I'll switch back to the Scale tool by pressing the S key. And I'm going to drag from right about here, again, diagonally from that origin point, down and to the left, in order to reduce the size of this object so that I'm once again matching the template. All right, now I want to keep all these outside petals and I want to lose the stuff on the inside. So I'll press the V key once again to switch to the black arrow tool, and I'll shift click on this deselected path right there. And then I'll click on the Pathfinder icon to bring up the Pathfinder panel, and I'll go ahead and click on Exclude in order to break up these shapes. And even though it doesn't really look like I've broken them up, I have. And to demonstrate what that looks like, I'll go ahead and first ungroup this shape by going to the Object menu and choosing the Ungroup command. Or, of course, you can press Control-Shift-G or Command-Shift-G on the Mac. Then, with my black arrow tool, I'll shift-click on each one of these outer petals in order to deselect it. So you have to shift-click on all 8 of them. And then, with this stuff in the middle still selected, go ahead and press the backspace key or the delete key on the Mac to get rid of it. All right, now notice this sort of spirally shape right here. Go ahead and click on it, and you can click on its bottom right anchor point if you want to select it. And then let's bring it to the front by right-clicking inside the document window, choosing Arrange, and then choosing Bring to Front. Or you've got that keyboard shortcut of Control-Shift-Right bracket, Command-Shift-Right bracket on the Mac. And now I'm going to change the color of this thing to, let's say, bright yellow, which is not available anywhere else inside the document. So it'll make it easy to select this item later. All right, now I'm going to press the R key to switch once again to the Rotate tool, and I will Alt or Option click in the center of this circle, which is going to be evident once again if you have your smart guides turned on. And this time I'm going to change the angle value to 90 degrees and I'll click the copy button in order to create a copy of that spiral. And then I'll press Control D or Command D on the Mac a couple of times in order to duplicate those shapes. All right, now I want to select all the yellow spirals. So I'll go up here to the control panel and I'll click the Select Similar Objects icon in order to select all 4. And then, because I now have symmetry, my transformation origin is right there in the middle of the circle. So I'll just press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to bring up the Rotate dialog box. I'll change the angle value to 45 degrees and I'll click Copy in order to create a copy of those shapes. Now I need to scale them to match the black petals in the background. And so I'll go ahead and select the Scale tool by pressing the S key. And then I'll press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to bring up the Scale dialog box, which is going to automatically replay my last scaling. And as a result, I'm going to get an exact match, at which point I'll just go ahead and click Copy to accept that change. All right, now I'm going to press the V key to switch to my black arrow tool, and I'll just go ahead and marquee all these shapes, or at least partially marquee them. And then I'll shift marquee these guys in order to deselect them. So I don't want the circle selected, but I do want everything else to be selected. Now I want to subtract all of the yellow spirals from the black petals. And I'm going to do that by bringing up the Pathfinder panel once again and clicking on one of those Pathfinders that I maligned back in Chapter 17, which is Trim. I have so much apologizing to do because notice when I click on Trim, I get the exact effect I'm looking for, which is to say I go ahead and trim all of those yellow spirals away from the black petals. And now all I have to do is ungroup the shape, of course, by going to the Object menu and choosing the Ungroup command. And then I'll click off the shapes to deselect them. I'll click on one of the yellow spirals. I'll click on the Select Similar Objects icon over here on the right side of the control panel, and then I'll press the Backspace key or the Delete key on the Mac to get rid of those guys. Now I'll click on one of the black shapes that's left over. I'll click the Select Similar Objects icon, and then I'll switch to my eyedropper, which I can get by pressing the I key, and then I'll just go ahead and click on this circle in order to fill the selected shapes with that same shade of blue. All right, now just go ahead and zoom out, and I'll switch back to the black arrow tool, click off the shapes to deselect them, and I will turn off that template layer. All right, so that's at least one way to transform partial path outlines, that is to say, round segments independently of their anchor points, as well as a great use for the previously maligned Pathfinder operation Trim here inside Illustrator.